Hi, I am going to talk through the writing of the literary analysis essay that I wrote as kind of an example and a model and a mentor text for you as you begin looking at revising and reworking the short story analysis essay that you wrote for this class. So I am using The Invisible Worker, and the text of that flash fiction story is still available in Google Classroom in Unit 1. I believe it's dated September 24th, class information. This is that story of the server who treated the dishwasher Alejandro badly and thought she was, better than he was, and then she feels invisible. And then at the end of her shift at the restaurant, she realizes how important it is to feel like someone sees you. And so that is the story that I selected and kind of the theme, the meaning of the story that I'm going to highlight in my writing. And I start my essay with a super short introduction, right? I'm just going to read it to you and then talk through my thinking as I wrote this. Being seen is important. Being recognized as a fellow human being can bring value to a day's work. The server in Jingwen Zhang's story, The Invisible Worker, experiences a transformation in her thinking through the course of one shift at the restaurant where she works, moving from feeling self-important to invisible to finally seen. She experiences an inner transformation that changes how she sees herself and the immigrant dishwasher she refused to see as a person. This highlighted portion is my thesis statement. It's a long sentence, but it kind of needs to be because my thesis statement has to be text specific, right? So I include the title and the author. And the thesis statement also needs to talk about the characters and the events in the text. So I talk about the server working at a restaurant, and then I use theme language, that idea of being invisible and being seen and the importance of being seen. So that language is included in here as well. And my thesis statement is arguable because I'm saying that she transformed through the course of this shift at work, and it changed how she was treating other people, particularly the immigrant dishwasher Alejandro. So that's my thesis statement. And then I start my first body paragraph. Please notice that the entire essay is double-spaced. That's one of the rules of MLA format, that essays are double-spaced. And also with MLA format, the first lines of our paragraphs must be indented, so we hit tab once. The other thing I want you to notice is the distance between my first paragraph and my second paragraph. When I got to the end of my first paragraph, I pushed the enter button one time, and that's all you need to do. There should not be a whole bunch of space in between paragraphs. You hit enter once, you indent the first line, and then you keep typing. So here's my first body paragraph. The unnamed server is partway through her shift at a restaurant when the irritation of dealing with ungrateful customers starts getting to her. She takes her frustration out on the immigrant dishwasher Alejandro, who is smiling away as he works. As she dumps her pile of dirty dishes in front of him, she notes that she didn't like to associate with him. She feels superior to Alejandro. I'm going to stop there for a moment because I want to just talk through what I did. I have a topic sentence at the very start of the paragraph that sort of sets the direction for the paragraph. I'm going to talk about the irritation at her shift. I also talk about further how she takes that frustration and irritation out on someone else. And then I'm going to include evidence to support that thinking, right? She takes her frustration out at him and she thinks to herself, she didn't like to associate with him. Please note how I'm using quotation marks, right? I'm only using a part of the sentence from the story, the most important part of that sentence, and weaving it into my own thinking. Notice that I have no end punctuation inside the quotation marks. Notice how I am using the author's last name, space, page number, and that the period goes at the very end of everything because this period is communicating that everything in front of the period goes together. It belongs together. So I have the direction setting for the paragraph. I have my thinking about what's going on. I have the evidence to support my thinking with the citation. And now I'm going to say something about that evidence, right? The fact that she didn't like to associate with him, I am saying she feels superior to Alejandro. Notice that I do not say this shows that she feels superior to Alejandro. I don't need to say this shows that or this evidence proves that. Those kinds of phrases are okay as training wheels in 9th grade and middle school where you're first learning how to use evidence and talk about evidence. But by the time you are a junior, you should no longer be using phrases like that. So one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is before you submit any analysis writing to go back through your essay and make sure you don't have those phrases in anymore. Some of you may be including them in as second nature, but they don't belong in higher level analysis writing. Just jump right into your analysis. So I have my thinking, I have my evidence to support my thinking, and I say something about that evidence. So she feels superior to Alejandro. There is a suggestion that she too comes from an immigrant family, but she makes it clear to distinguish that he was that kind of immigrant. Again, I have thinking, my thinking. I have evidence from the text to support my thinking. And then I have how that evidence proves my point, right? He was that kind of immigrant, which means, in other words, he is beneath her recognition. And she does not want to be considered the same as Alejandro, a man she believes has proved himself to be a failure. So all of those reasons come together to explain why the server in this story thinks that Alejandro deserves to be invisible and that she is more important than he is. I go on to say, while the server might be from an immigrant family, she holds herself as superior to Alejandro, deeming him unworthy of her notice, or the notice of anyone else for that matter. She looks down on Alejandro for his toothless grin and his red hands with cracked skin. She thinks her pretty face, polite voice, and good grades in school make her more valuable than the invisible dishwasher in the dish pit, and she treats Alejandro as invisible. Okay, so that whole first paragraph is all about her sense of superiority. Then I am going to talk about the next part of my thesis statement, which is supposed to be about how she's made to feel invisible. So the server's superiority is challenged by the guests at table 8. Whoops, I scrolled. Sorry about that. The server's superiority is challenged by the guests at table 8. The single father, along with his 2 boys at table 8, through a careless comment, destroy the server's sense of superiority. As the server greets the family and takes their orders, one of the boys crashes into her. No one apologizes to her for the collision, and as she walks away, she hears the boy complain to his dad, "I didn't see her." I forgot to cite that. With very few words, the server's illusion of superiority crumbles. I know that's on page 1. Okay. Notice how I set the direction for the paragraph. I'm going to talk about her superiority being challenged primarily by table 8. I give a sense of context, like what's happening with this table 8 people. And then I have the evidence to show that they did not see her, at least the little boy did not see her, right? No one apologizes to her. She hears the boy complain, "I didn't see her," and I cite it. With very few words, the server's illusion of superiority crumbles. So this is my explanation for how "I didn't see her" affects the server's sense of superiority. And then I go further, thinking more about it. She wonders, how could the little boy not see her? How could someone deem her unseen? Notice that I have 3 dots there. in the text, this is actually a 3-sentence long quotation, but I didn't want to use all of it and I didn't need the stuff in the middle. So I use the 3 dots to indicate that I've left stuff out and I'm using only the part that is most relevant. It's space saving and it helps me to stay on point. The other thing I want to show you is this is probably I have two. I have 2 quotations that have punctuation inside the quotation mark. I didn't see her exclamation mark, quotation mark. And then this one, unseen, question mark, quotation mark. The only time you include end punctuation inside the quotation marks is when it's an exclamation mark or a question mark. Otherwise, there is no punctuation inside of the quotation marks ever, okay? The end punctuation always goes at the end. So she wonders, how could the little boy not see her? How could someone deem her unseen? She had created an illusion of superiority for herself, distancing herself from that kind of immigrant. I'm restating the quotation I used earlier in the story. And believing that her good looks and good grades made her more valuable than Alejandro in the dish pit. The boy's words stayed with her for the rest of her shift, and a malignant doubt crept into her heart. So I'm using little bits and pieces of quotations sprinkled into my explanation of how her superiority is challenged, right? And the effects of that on her. Because the little boy didn't see her, she has sort of an internal emotional meltdown where she just can't quite grasp that she also is invisible. And I explain that here. She struggles to comprehend the reality that other people would consider her invisible and lacking in value, the very same way she viewed Alejandro. She realizes that perhaps others might see her as that kind of immigrant, again repeating a quotation from earlier. This new understanding of herself ruins her workday. She does not want to accept the suggestion that she too is an invisible worker. I am at 12 minutes in my recording and I still have a bunch I need to say. So what I'm going to do is pause at the end of this paragraph because I want to make sure that I have time to walk through the rest of the essay and talk through my thinking. I lead up, I'm giving context, right? I'm telling you where and when in the story this thing happened. And I'm then giving you the evidence, and then I'm explaining how that evidence supports my thinking. And that's a pattern that I follow in every paragraph. My thinking, evidence to support my thinking, and then the explanation for how that evidence supports my thinking. With that, I'm going to stop this recording, and then I'll restart part 2.